companies are now moving their manufacturing to Mexico. They've already invested billions of dollars in the country, building up factories and supply chains. This is a fascinating development because it tells us two important things. Mexico is now a very attractive place to do business, and China is, well, not that attractive anymore. After all, why are Chinese companies moving out of China if things are going well at home? The truth is, it's not going well for the country. Since the COVID pandemic hit in 2020, things are going downhill in China. The first thing we should look at are the supply chain weaknesses that were exposed during the recent years. This isn't the first time you'll hear about globalization and outsourcing manufacturing, as these concepts have shaped our modern economy. Basically, companies from Western countries have moved their manufacturing to other, cheaper countries. For decades, globalization has been a trend that countries like China benefited from enormously. Because other countries started to outsource their manufacturing, China became a manufacturing giant. China had an abundance of cheap labor, which made it the best place for manufacturing businesses. But this globalization had one huge disadvantage. It makes countries reliant on other countries. China is the world's top manufacturer, producing 28.7% of the world's manufacturing output. Because of this huge market share, global supply chains are largely reliant on the Chinese economy. And when the COVID-19 pandemic happened, this overdependence on the Chinese economy clearly showed. The long and ruthless lockdowns in China caused economic unrest and supply chain weaknesses all over the world. A lot of governments came to the same conclusion. It's not smart to have all your manufacturing in one country. Diversifying your manufacturing by outsourcing it to different countries is a lot safer, even though it comes with a heavier price tag due to more investments. For example, Apple is now diversifying its manufacturing by adding Indian companies to its supply chain. The Chinese companies moving to Mexico might be doing the same thing, diversifying their manufacturing. If something unfortunate were to happen in China, these companies would still have their manufacturing plants in Mexico up and running. But supply chain safety isn't the only motivator driving these companies in Mexico. Cheap labor certainly has a huge role to it. The quoted monthly earnings in Mexico are $874, which is significantly lower than China's quoted earnings of $1,336 per month. Chinese manufacturers want to make money, and by moving to Mexico, this gets easier due to the lower labor costs. And the costs of labor aren't the only explanation. In China, many manufacturing companies are facing acute labor shortages. The new Chinese generation is smaller than the older ones, and many young Chinese people aren't willing to work factory jobs. The reason for this is that the new generation has a higher education than the previous one, making them, well, overqualified for manual work. Basically, there are less people in China, and even less of them considering low-paying jobs. This has led to more than 80% of Chinese manufacturers facing labor shortages from 10% up to 30%. If these manufacturers don't have the people at home, they're forced to move abroad. And Chinese companies moving to Mexico fit perfectly in this trend. But the reasons for things going downhill in China aren't only economic, they're also heavily political. The turmoil that began with the US-China trade war has caused significant damage to Chinese manufacturing. In 2018, US President Donald Trump began to impose high tariffs on imports from China, which hurt Chinese businesses wanting to export to the huge US market. In one single move, he increased the taxes on $200 billion worth of goods. And President Biden, well, he didn't make the situation a whole lot better for these Chinese companies. His administration maintained the tariffs Trump imposed, which didn't help with stopping the trade war. He even went as far as to add new restrictions on the Chinese economy, most notably on the chip industry that is so crucial to the country. In deals with other countries like Japan or the Netherlands, Biden effectively destroyed the supply chains of Chinese chip manufacturers. For Chinese companies exporting to the United States, this ongoing trade war is very bad for business. This is yet another reason for Chinese manufacturing companies to now move to Mexico. Mexico is located right next to the US market, and it doesn't have the same restrictions placed on itself as China has. Adding on to this, diversifying your manufacturing to other countries is a smart move due to the same political reasons. With the situation around Taiwan getting very tense, a conflict between the United States and China is not completely out of the picture. An American four-star general predicts that the two will be at war by 2025. Now, this is a topic for a whole nother video, but these speculations do concern companies about potential geopolitical risks of doing business in China. Maybe it's safer if you have some of your manufacturing elsewhere, because a war will be pretty devastating for everyone involved. And in the terrible scenario that comes with a war, there's a good chance Mexico won't be involved.